So hello, everyone. My name's Ratnavyuha. I'm recording this from Auckland, New Zealand. It's a Wednesday, the 1st of April, which is also a good friend of ours' birthday over in the States, a friend of ours named Chandradasa. But I've got my good friend Dhivan with me from Chester in the UK. Hey, Dhivan.
Hello, Ratnavyuha, and everyone in Auckland. And it's still March here in the UK.
Oh, yes, true. So Dhivan and I Skype regularly anyways, and we were talking this morning, and I thought, well, look, could we just tape what we're saying? And Dhivan said, well, yeah, since I don't have to prepare for it, I'm quite happy to just talk and have it recorded. So we're lucky. I feel very fortunate. So what's it like in Chester at the moment?
It's really quiet, Ratnavyuha. I can step out onto my balcony and not hear any cars, just hear the spring bird song, which is kind of a blessing, but it also feels so unnatural or strange that you know that it's not quite right.
Mm. And what do you do in Chester?
I'm a lecturer at the University of Chester. I teach philosophy and mainly Indian religions and Buddhism to undergraduates.
Yeah. And of course, Dhivan and I, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're both members of the Triratna Buddhist order. So we're both ordained Buddhists too. The Triratna Buddhist order was founded by Sangharakshita back in 1968. So you've been doing a lot of research on the spiral path over the past many years, actually. I think as long as you've been researching, you've been keen on that topic. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it's an extension of my interest in the Buddha's teaching of dependent arising or conditionality. This is like the central philosophical contribution that the Buddha made all those years ago. And it's the teaching that things exist dependent on conditions. And when those conditions stop existing, things pass away. So it's very simple. It sounds quite obvious, but it's a teaching that has really deep implications. We usually think of things kind of existing somehow through their own force or power, or just because they're there, we just take things for granted. But especially in our experience, we can think, my life's a certain way, it just seems it's always that way, or I just tend to experience these kind of mental states. But the Buddha's teaching points to how everything arises on conditions. So we need, if we don't like something, especially in our experience, we can ask, well, what are the conditions on which this phenomenon arises? The idea of the spiral path comes out of this. It's the idea that the path to awakening, the goal of the Buddhist path, itself arises on certain conditions. It's not an accident that people become awakened, and it's not a matter of grace from a sort of supreme being. It's a matter of an unfolding of conditions.
I just remember that was really important for me when I was first exploring Buddhism, the idea that I could do something, that I could change my own life, that I could take action, that I could start meditating, I could choose to act with kindness, I could reflect on certain topics, and that was huge for me.
Just what you just said just reminds me of the way the path is said to start from this quality called Shraddha, which often gets translated faith, but maybe we should really think of it as more like trust or confidence. And like you say, when we hear the Buddha's teaching, it could be that it kind of touches us in some way. It feels interesting or excites us, and that's what we mean by kind of trust or confidence. Something lights up the Buddha's teaching seems to just speak to us from slightly beyond where we're at or something. And that's so important because it's that sense of getting a helpful teaching which encourages us to make some sort of effort, or think actually maybe it is possible for our experience to change.
I remember you did a really fabulous retreat in Auckland, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, on conditionality, because you wrote a book on this topic, didn't you?
This being That Becomes, the Buddhist
Yeah.
teaching on conditionality.
Yeah, highly recommended for anybody that might want to read something on this topic a bit longer. But in that retreat that you did, you also talked about three different ways, three different kind of spiral paths in a way, didn't you? You talked about kindness and action being one spiral path, that we could respond to the world with kindness. And what were those three ways that you kind of identified? It was all from the Pali Canon, I think I remember.
Was it? I think now this was going back 7 years now.
Yeah.
But if I recall correctly, there'll be the firstly the path of meditation.
Yeah.
Or deepening integration. That's the usual way we understand the spiral path teachings, that starting from faith, perhaps it becomes possible to find pleasure and enjoyment in meditation, and then a deepening integration resulting in samadhi, or complete unification of mind. But another way the path could unfold is in terms of the development of emotional positivity. So based on this same faith, we might turn our attention to developing the quality of kindness or friendliness, which is more like a heart quality. And that quality, once it gets going, can, as it were, grow, and it can further develop into compassion and sympathetic joy, and a kind of equanimity, very positive state of being okay with whatever happens. And that too can lead to this kind of unification of our experience. And then the third path, I hope this is what I said, is the development of insight that can come from either of those two paths. That based on this unification of our mind and heart, we can turn our attention to reflecting on, well, what is life like? What is my experience like? And notice like how everything keeps changing. And then it becomes clear that it's just not worth holding on too much to things that continue to change. And with that, a quality of letting go can start to make sense to us. With letting go arises more freedom in our whole being.
Yeah, that's what I remember you talking about.
Ah, good.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, and it's interesting because the Buddhist tradition, a lot of these teachings, the Buddhism's gone into many different cultures over the years, and there's many different angles in to this kind of experience that it's pointing to, enlightenment. But all those angles in, all those different formulations, all those different perspectives, they don't square up logically, do they? They kind of there's lots of different ways, and what people are really encouraged to do is find practices that work for them and find ways that work for them. And so those are three different approaches, aren't they, to the same path?
The more I study Buddhist teachings, especially the early ones, the more I appreciate how the Buddha's basically teaching a practical method. Which and although it can sometimes look like a system and have a certain logic, that's just an appearance. It's good for sort of remembering it, but underneath is simply an account of an invitation to explore our experience in practical ways and discover how actually each of us, once we start to notice how our experience works, we can learn just quite practically how to help ourselves develop. It's not really systematic, I don't think, for anybody.
Yep. Yep. And one of the beautiful things about the spiral path is that in the early Buddhist traditions, there's definitely the teaching of the wheel of life, this wheel of becoming, where you are repeating your mistakes in a way. You're repeating being caught in your life and feeling caught and feeling like you can't get out, feeling like there's no escape. And that the quality of that being caught can change. You can kind of flow into a new experience. I remember there's a great book by D.H. Lawrence called The Rainbow, where it's a story of families in England, and in each family, the kids kind of say, "Oh no, we're not going to repeat our parents' mistakes. We're going to live differently." And even though they don't repeat their parents' mistakes and they do live differently, the quality, the essential existential quality of what they create is the same as what their parents had.
Wow.
And you go through 3 different families, I think, where this happens. And at the end of it, you're just seeing that even though everything's changed in the details, kind of in the essential quality of their lives, nothing's changed, and you just get depressed. You're just like, oh my God, are they going to get out of this cycle? And that's like the wheel of life. But at that point in the book, Lawrence introduces a new character. I think her name's Ursula. And Ursula kind of comes through, and Ursula is different. Ursula walks the spiral path. She becomes an individual. She takes a different route, like quite qualitatively different. And I think that's the interesting thing about the spiral path, is that, we can go around in circles, and human life has been going around in circles for decades. Some people claim that nothing has fundamentally changed in thousands of years. We're still scrambling for wealth and killing one another. And we haven't fundamentally changed. We haven't fundamentally grown up in any qualitative way.
Well, yeah. One of what you just said reminds me of Sangharakshita's image of the gravitational pull of the conditioned. He talks about. He gave this talk in the late 60s, in the time of the first moon missions.
Yeah.
And he made the point that the wheel of life is comparable to the Earth's gravity. It's very hard to escape it. We're just pulled back to the surface of the Earth, and our weighty kind of existences, walking around in the same old surface. But with enough velocity, we can reach a point where we can we can escape. An escape velocity is possible, to escape from the gravitational attraction of the Earth. And at that point, it's possible to head off into the unknown, towards the moon. And although that's a kind of, it's an image. It's not. I don't think we can take it in any sense literally. I know I can sense that in my experience sometimes, that I've got my habits, which some of them are very long lasting and a bit wearisome, but sometimes I can sense a little bit of freedom arising through meditation and making an effort to counter those habits. And the feeling is of a kind of lightness and freedom, really.
And the beauty of that gravitational pull metaphor is that once you've started to taste that freedom can become an overriding kind of, it can become the strongest, in a way, the strongest pull in your life. So you're naturally being pulled to it. That's the notion of stream entry in Buddhism, that you get to a point where you see that you're not, that, there isn't a fixed self, that you're not your habits, that
Yeah.
those things can change. And when you see that kind of in a thorough way, your whole life might not be transformed yet, but your whole life is heading to transformation.
Yeah. I've got a question for you here, Ratnavyuha.
Uh-oh, uh-oh.
uh,
What's that?
do you think, well, in your experience of many years of practicing meditation and dharma, do, do, do you think it's actually possible, really, to have that experience of escape from habits and so on, that kind of freedom?
I think it's an interesting question. I think that's a really good question, because I think in my life, my experience has been that basically what I substitute my unhelpful habits for is helpful habits. And then from the helpful habits, I then see from the helpful habits a kind of a ray of light coming through there, which feels like where I'm going. So you were, I know that one of the other things you're very interested in is loving kindness towards the whole world and towards all of our experience rather than just towards sentient beings. And I've been exploring positive emotion now and the Brahma Viharas and the Metta Bhavana for many years now. And it's a positive habit. I cultivate kindness towards people. I cultivate equanimity and compassion, and I try and rejoice and appreciate and connect in with gratitude. And it is a habit. It has to be a habit. But when I practice it as a habit, there are times when I feel something else arising, which is a deep love, which isn't based on conditions. So I think your question's good, because in the beginning, I think you do have to practice as habit. You have to have positive habits, and then those positive habits in a way kind of lead you into a more spontaneous experience. What about your thoughts on the question?
Yeah, I suppose I wanted to ask you the question because I didn't want to presuppose I knew what your experience was like.
Yeah.
But I suppose my reflection is that I think the idea of an escape out of the gravitational pull of our habits is a very beautiful ideal, but I'm not sure it's one that we're very likely to experience exactly in that pure way, but rather what I experience is something like more and more of a sense of trust and confidence in my own creative ability to be creative when I feeling I'm getting stuck,
Yep.
or I'm in a habit or in a negative mental state. Just I can notice, this is unwholesome, or this is habitual, and I can think, but I do trust there's going to be some way to be creative, which is, I suppose, another version of that sense of some kind of force or possibility of light and love that's bigger than ourselves. That
Yeah, yeah, and I think that I'd say that I for whatever reason, I'm not emphasizing the aspect you spoke of, but I'd say that I experienced that too. That there's a bit of me that does have confidence, does trust that. Put the curtain in front of does trust that that I can, that being stuck is that I can. There's another alternative. It's like. I actually turned towards the Metta Bhavana and the Brahma Viharas because I was having difficulty with some people who I was living and working with, and a couple people in particular. And I knew that their motivations and what they were aiming towards and what their values were very much in alignment with mine, but our personalities were in conflict and our ways of approaching it were in conflict. And I had faith that somehow I could find a way through to collaborating with them, to developing a friendship with them. And it was frustrating to keep falling back into disharmony, into kind of bickering and arguing and being a problem, basically our relationship being a problem. And I remember feeling like, well, no, I don't want to live that way. That's not what I want to have in my life. That's not how I want my life to be lived. And I could have had the choice to leave that situation, but my first choice was to work within it. And I think I had shraddha, I had faith, I had confidence. I trusted that there was the possibility for something more.
That's encouraging for me to hear, actually. I'm having a bit of an ongoing communication issue with somebody at work at the moment. Someone whose whole approach I don't understand. And it feels like we aren't connecting positively. But I've been noticing how mainly we're communicating by email recently, by necessity. But even when we talk, there's the same sense of not quite connecting. I might get an email and sense this how what's being communicated just isn't how I do it, and I feel frustrated. And I'm getting used to this process of taking a deep breath and just relaxing into, I suppose, something outside of my ego's desire to have things my way. I'm relaxing into, well, there's all sorts of people in the world and doing things in their own kinds of way. Can I somehow get a feel for other ways of going about doing things? And it's been very useful because I've had some real insights into, this person's way of doing things is outside my range, but I'm beginning to appreciate it. And that's giving me little ways to sort of sense how we could work together if I can meet those ways in which my colleague works. Although I also feel I don't want to get too passive and just only connect on somebody else's terms. It's quite important I learn to be a bit more assertive about, well, these are my values as well. But if I can do that in a positive, loving way, I trust that it'll be received anyway.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. That's really great. One of the things that's always interested me in the Brahmaviharas is Mudita is the Brahmavihara, which is a rejoicing, appreciation, kind of a valuing of others, seeing the value in others and kind of highlighting it. But Mudita is also associated with the all-accomplishing wisdom. And I realized that I am better when I'm working in a harmonious, cooperative team with others. I am more of what I can be. I don't actually achieve my greatest kind of capacity by myself. Other people, when I'm resonating with them harmoniously, draw out the best of me. And that's why I love friendships. That's why I love our friendship, because you've always drawn out more in me than I could draw out of myself. But I think that's an interesting side of this positive emotional thing, is that if we can work together, bringing each other's strengths out, but not losing our own values. And that's kind of like, there's a fine balance there, because you can't lose yourself. You can't become passive. It doesn't do anybody any favors if you just abdicate to another. But at the same time, you're in a communication. It's a collaborative thing, and you want to pull in their strengths. I just think that's fascinating territory. And to be honest, I think that's the territory that Buddhism points to. This idea that the bodhicitta arises in a group of people rather than an individual.
That makes me think of in Sri Ratna, one of Sangharakshita's ideas about the nature of Sangha is that it calls it a free association of individuals.
Mm.
And that's something I like to reflect on. It's we can suppose that the spiritual community is like a group of people who, like you say, are very harmonious and so on. And again, that would be great if that kind of thing naturally happened. But of course, in reality, uh, uh, it's usually more complicated. But the idea of an association of individuals is a much more subtle idea of what a community is. What Sangha means by individuals is people who know themselves and are kind of self-motivated in quite a deep way. They're not reliant on others to practice the Dharma or meditate or reflect on their values, for instance. There's a sort of connection to their own intelligence and their own initiative. And yet, when that's in connection with other people, who are like-minded, something bigger happens. And that's something I when you and I talk, or when we get together occasionally, if
Yeah.
you're visiting, or I've been over to there, there's a sense of greater possibilities of working together, which is really quite. It's a particularly enjoyable aspect of Sangha.
It was interesting. I was talking to Perna the other, is months ago, but we were exploring this teaching of the true individual that Sangha developed. And, at the time, he really emphasized people being, in a way, independent almost. But I remember Perna telling me that he talked to Sangha, and Sangha said if he had to re-express those teachings in today's time, he would have emphasized collaboration.
Ah.
Yeah. And I thought that was fascinating because, what's called for in any given moment, the quality that's called for is different, isn't it? I mean, sometimes in life we need to be patient. Other times we need to be quite active. And, you just can't say that you just need to be active all the time, because if you just got one tool in your toolbox, you're going to be hammering a lot of nails, right? And you're going to be trying to hammer a lot of screws at the same time. So, best to have quite a few tools for different jobs.
This is really intriguing to talk about collaboration. It makes me think, when I lead retreats from time to time, and one of my favorite things is leading a retreat up in Scotland at Dharmakosha Retreat Centre, which unfortunately has been cancelled this year. It would have been next week. And I introduce the Buddhist themes, but I'm working with order member friends in a team, especially Nayaka, the director up there, and more recently Vandikar. And although I teach the material, we're constantly sort of teaching as a team as well, collaborating to share our understanding of the meaning of dependent arising. And I think it triples the value of the teachings, because different Buddhist practitioners are able to draw on a different kind of experience of putting these teachings into practice and transforming different conditions and their own experience.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and this is brilliant for teaching, because the people on the retreat get a sense of the way the Dharma is not just what this person says; it's the sum total of all sorts of different stories of how the Dharma has touched on people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's brilliant. It's great stuff. So I'm going to wrap it up, because actually, to be honest, we did have a Skype call this morning, you and I, and I'd like to speak to you a bit more personally, not recording it.
Okay.
So But thanks for being willing to let me record this. And it'll be up on our the Auckland Buddhist Center YouTube site. I'll put it up there and people can watch it. So, yeah. Thanks,
Well,
Dhivan.
thank you, Ratnavyuha, and all the best to everyone in Auckland.
All right.